Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Ask the Expert. For the independent investor, my name is Santiago Arnaiz. I'm the managing editor, and I just want to say before we dive into today's discussion, before I introduce you to today's guest, thank you to all of our audience members who send in questions. This is our third episode now of Ask the Expert, and your questions really help ground these conversations. So please keep sending them in. For this episode, I'm thrilled to be joined by the Chairman of Sea Indonesia, a board member of Gojek, the Commissioner of the Indonesia Stock Exchange, Director of Toba Bara, and Chairman of the Indonesian Coal Mining Association, a partner at Indies Capital, and a partner at AC Ventures. Just the one guest today, wearing all those hats. So, joining us today to talk about the expansive role that he plays in Indonesia's innovation community, his views on the Philippine early stage ecosystem, the lessons he's learned over his 2 decades as one of the region's most influential investors, and his thoughts on what's next for Southeast Asia. Our expert today is none other than Pandu Sjahrir. You wear so many different hats, you have so many different roles across Indonesia, the early stage ecosystem, the stock exchange, your other personal projects, the companies that you're affiliated with. What is keeping you most busy this week? Just this week.
Wow, this week. This week, I mean, to be honest, everything I do revolves around two things, Santi. Energy, and I guess energy transition, and digitalization. And this digitalization is actually all through my investment in the funds, right? AC Venture for the seed to early stage, right? And Indies for the pre-IPO stage. So, if you put it that way, actually pretty simple. And if you talk about this week, I guess the big things that we were working on this week, AC Venture just had a all women's day founders. So we had a bunch of 50, 60 women founders. Abel was there. One of our VP, Laura, was leading the task for it. It was really awesome. Had really positive feedback because they were able to meet up and kind of share, the pains, the success, the travails of being a women entrepreneur and a women investor. Yesterday too, we had an announcement about one of our efforts in carbon credit. So Air Carbon, which is our business, had a JV with CarbonX, which is one of the leading carbon exchanges globally, right? CarbonX itself just had an investment by Deutsche Post, by the Deutsche Stock Exchange. So it's, that's this week, right? And I just got back from Dubai, Abu Dhabi and Dubai, where, hopefully we'll share some good news from there, which also shows a lot of interest by foreign investors into Indonesia's growth. So yeah, it's been a fun week, I would say, positive, I would say, but yeah, super busy as you can imagine, Santi. And also my daughter's birthday today. That's probably most important. And so I woke up at 5:30 a.m. She woke me up saying, "Hey, it's my birthday." I said, "I got it, Chief. It's your birthday." That's by far the most important.
Yeah, we can't bury the lead there. That's the headline. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the headline. She's the boss.
So many things happening for the Indonesian startup ecosystem. I'm hoping maybe we can put that in perspective. So not too long ago, Indonesia was where the Philippines was, which was poised for growth, but with the pieces not yet completely in place. You were among the earliest movers in building up Indonesia's startup ecosystem. And of course, that's clearly evidenced in the many roles you play right now guiding the regional tech community. But I want to go back to the earlier parts of this story. What was it about the nascent Indonesian startup ecosystem that made you choose to invest in growing it in the first place? Like, what did you see?
No, man. I thought you'd think I would be smarter than that, having a view, but I don't. I just thought technology back then. I was in mining, right? My family business is in mining, in energy, which now we're pivoting away from, right? Because I'll tell you more about it, but back then in 2013, 14, I thought just the cheapest way I can get exposure in an asset class was technology, because there's just not many players. We don't need that amount of capital, so it was really my primary capital, investing in a couple of these tech companies. And that's how it started. It was actually limited supply, and the limited supply of companies, and the capital provider is also very small. So we got lucky. I would say there's also confluence of luck, right? You cannot ignore that. At the time, what is it called? There was a growing middle class, but similar to the Philippines as well. But probably most important, our president was so into technology and how technology can improve the daily lives of people. So he was a big proponent of it. So I think the changing point was in 2016, end of 2016, when Masayoshi came in Tokopedia, one of the early e-commerce companies, right, at the time. And he came in, and at the time, the valuation was 100 million, and everybody was like, whoa, what's going on, right? And number two, also the growth of Gojek in 2016 and 2017, when there was such a big protest between the existing offline taxi players and the new taxi players, and there were commotion. There's even protests. And then the government said, no, we're going to step in. I think there's always good to have competition. It's always good to have innovation. That actually gives you a signal, you know what, technology is just a big push of people wanting to have more innovation into the system. That drives more investment into technology. And frankly, 2020 was a big turning point because of COVID, where there was significant acceleration of people moving from offline to online and everything. That was the growth of fintech, right? The first stage was the growth of e-commerce and also ride sharing, just the usage of technology on your everyday lives. But 2020 was a big push simply because of COVID. And now I would say Indonesia is probably the leader in ASEAN in terms of technology investment, technology companies by number of unicorns, etc., especially in the three big area, e-commerce, fintech. And I would say the others would be related to logistics, ride sharing, and all the others, which hits the everyday consumer, right? So, super exciting time. I would say we're still in the early stage. We're probably 5-7 years behind of China, 10 years, 15 years behind of the US, but catching up very quickly because of the adoption of mobile. Now, if you'd say, what are the next 3-4 years, things that can improve this or adopt faster? Number one is digital infrastructure, right? Digital infrastructure related to 5G rollout, related to data center, the growth of data center, that becomes increasingly significant so people can use it much faster, right? And number two, obviously, overall trust. So this is consumer trust related to using mobile for your daily transactions. And that's important because what's happening today in Indonesia, people are moving, the unbanked are being tapped to become the underbanked, and the underbanked is being tapped to become the bankable. And those that are investing are all the fintech, not the traditional banks, the fintech players. That's what they're doing. So it's super cool, right? It's super cool what's going on in Indonesia right now. I'll drink my coffee, Santi, while we're talking. Yeah, hopefully you don't mind.
Absolutely, by all means. Have 3 cups. I'm gonna have my 4th later. So, the number of the trends that you pointed out there, especially COVID, with the pandemic in the past 2 years, really accelerating digital adoption. We've seen that in the Philippines as well, right? And interestingly, on a per capita basis, the Philippines and Indonesia are pretty similar. Obviously, Indonesia much larger in scale, but both nations archipelagic, diverse countries. That said, Indonesia has managed to build this massively successful ecosystem, whereas the Philippines is a bit of a laggard in that regard. Do you have any ideas as to why that is?
You know what? I can't comment on the Philippines. I love going to Manila. Before COVID, I probably go 3 times a year. I have a lot of very good friends there, and actually we share very similar culture. So I love going to Manila. But one thing I can say about Indonesia, and I'll comment on Indonesia, is that the focus of the president is quite strong. He only has 3 moving forward. One is respect to healthcare and how do you reform healthcare. Number 2 is about energy transition. So moving from mining to renewable and where carbon is involved, and also what is it called? Using battery technology for your everyday uses, right? And number 3 is with respect to digitalization. So it's a big theme for this G20. So it's been a big focus area. There's a lot of support, government support, with respect to whether it's fiscal incentive, whether it's through licenses, to ease all this, right? And that's why you're seeing a lot of risk capital coming into the country, because you can see that the macro is very supportive, and that's important, right? And number 2, during the 2020, when there were a lot of social help to the poor, the government uses technology to do that. So they actually worked together with all of us in the e-commerce side. They had a program, Bangga Buatan Indonesia. It's proud wearing Indonesian products, right? And the way they're doing it in terms of giving social help, whether it's cash help or others, everything was done online through the mobile. So that's why adoption was very strong. When we used the first, I'll give you an example, May 2020, when we were doing this Bangga Buatan Indonesia movement, all the e-commerce player participated. Within 1 month, 1 million new merchant came in using from offline to online to start selling through the online platform. And it doesn't matter what platform you're using, right? But that's significant. Until today, there's probably at least 12 million new merchant that has come in, right? Using from offline moving to online. And that's really amazing, because then they're not selling just within their own small circle. They're selling all across Indonesia and potentially exporting too, and one of it to Philippines. So if you ask me what has made it successful, the key ingredient has been a strong government support, and that has been shown through action, right? And number two, because of that, there's a lot of risk on capital. And what you can see too now, the last 6-9 months in my role as in the Indonesian stock exchange, a board member, is to push people to invest, as well as companies, high-tech companies, to list in Indonesia. We've been successful with Bukalapak, and also now Goto in the next 2 weeks, right? And we've been hearing very positive news about the Goto IPO. That's also been a good circle of success, right? Because then early stage investors can sell during the IPO stage. I'll give you an example. Last year, we were the largest exchange in all of ASEAN in terms of bringing companies to list, and the amount of capital that we listed. The largest IPO in the region and the largest rights issue in the region was done out of Indonesia, right? BRI as well as Bukalapak. This year, I think the largest IPO, Goto will be the second largest IPO globally, right? And that'll be done out of the Indonesian Stock Exchange. That from the company listing, from the number of people that have joined us, pre-COVID was 2 million. Today we have close to 9 million individuals that are signing up, right, in the stock exchange. That's a 4x, right, in the last 2 years. So, these are positive news, but then obviously there's still a lot of challenges that we go through, but I just see it as an opportunity.
Absolutely. And I understand, of course, speaking to the Indonesian success story over the past, not just 2 years, but it's say 5, 8 years, there are patterns that are unique to Indonesia that you can't just port over to the Philippines. But I'd love if we can do a bit of a comparison. So in the Philippines, we see a bit of an iron triangle, is what some of us refer to as the fintech, logistics, payments, right? These enablers, especially now in the past 2 years with the digital adoption that's rising, trend that's rising here. These sectors are really the ones that are supporting the ecosystem today in the Philippines. Looking back to maybe just like 2 years ago or 3 years ago, in the Indonesia's tech boom, which sectors led the way back then? Was it the same? Was it also fintech, logistics, and payments? And does it?
Yeah, so I think I would say fintech, logistic, payment has to do with e-commerce, right? So after e-commerce, the way you got to make money is to lend, and the lend is whether it's through consumptive behavior, so consumer lending, or productive behavior through SME, right? And after that, logistic essentially is to also help the e-commerce, right? And payment is just a flow. The flow going through fintech, right? So all these three things are similar, but I would say I probably put fintech and payment as one, right? Within fintech too, you probably have to separate. There's payment, there's BNPL or lending, and when you talk about lending, you probably go to banking, and later on investment. And investment, you go through the stock market as well as insurance, right? So you gotta recategorize it, right? And that's probably the biggest one within the Philippines and also Indonesia. Why? Because we are users of capital. Our country for growth are users of capital, and that usage can be from domestic or foreign, right? So if you look at it macro, and what is the job of fintech? Is how do you distribute capital more efficiently from the provider of capital to the user of capital? And then hopefully, if you do it well enough, that money will recycle well and create value over time. That's it. And it's how to use technology for financial service. That's what fintech is, right?
Yeah.
So, and logistics, same thing. How do you get from point A to point B more efficiently using technology? And similarly, I think the city of Manila, similar to the city of Jakarta, where city planning, it started, from the beginning to now, there's a lot of human touches, which makes it complicated instead of making it easy. Logistic is, using technology is how do we go from point A to point B and maybe from point B, C, D, etc. Make it as cost efficient as possible. Right? That's it. And that's what's so cool about this, because technology is touching on the very basic premise of your everyday life. We're not even going more complicated than that, right? We're just the very basic premise of everyday life, right? Whether you pay for things, whether you want to get things, and whether you want to get capital to build things, right? So I would say we're still in that stage, the beginning stage. Indonesia, I think, has been seeing a lot of innovation in those three sectors. And yeah, we're growing. In fact, right now, the big trend in Indonesia is now in terms of investment. How do you people grow, younger people grow their wealth using the different platforms that's available?
Yeah, just a quick note on the topic of logistics. I was reading this article from the Ken recently about shipping, and in the
Mhm.
Philippines specifically. And I don't know if you were able to read that one, but it's just this fascinating insight that really distilled what a lot of us here in the tech ecosystem know, which is shipping in an archipelagic region is a nightmare.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the insights was it's cheaper and more convenient, but it's cheaper to ship something from Singapore to Manila than it is from Manila to any of the outer islands of the country. And so,
Mm.
and in a similar way, I guess it's similar trend. We're seeing a lot of startups in the Philippines. When they choose to expand, they choose to expand to Ho Chi Minh, to Hanoi, to Jakarta before they think about expanding to other cities in the Philippines. And so I guess,
Mm.
I mean, from my perspective, it speaks the the not just the economic environment, but also the political environment, the regulatory environments.
Uh,
Were they
uh,
are these challenges you see as well from you in your side of
yeah,
the
yeah.
region?
Indonesia, to be honest, our job is archipelago to go from the most eastern part of Indonesia to go to the western part. And our president already stated that we want to be able to distribute goods, and the price of goods from east to west has to be the same regardless. And yeah, I think everyone noticed it. Logistic is a big problem, but it's also potentially a solution we got to solve. And whoever can solve it will will create a lot of value, right, for that company, right? So, if you see a lot of the logistic players like Sichapat, the company we invest in, it's the largest local logistic company, can deliver end to end at the most efficient way, right? From all the way eastern part of Indonesia to the western part, from Sabang to Merauke. And that's important. Our focus is actually still domestic. And how do you create efficiency across all of Indonesia? You solve that, then obviously then you can focus on other parts of the ASEAN journey. And yes, I mean, we've been fortunate. Our government is very supportive of these type of efforts. Frankly, again, COVID helps a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we have to distribute vaccine, we got to distribute help, drugs, right? What is a good example, again, my dear friend who's a minister of health, he was a business person, right, before becoming a minister of health, and all he focuses on was logistic, right?
Mm-hmm.
But today in Indonesia, if you got COVID, same day, especially among all across, actually this is all across Indonesia, you will get the medicine in the same day or within 24 hours for free, which is amazing, right?
That is amazing.
So this is something incredible. We this Ministry of Health has also distributed over 400 million plus vaccine shots for free, right? And that was a logistical play, and that actually helps. And all of it was actually through application, work with WhatsApp, and also working with an app called Peduli Lindungi, which is an all national app that is the most widely downloaded this last year, right? The most downloaded app in all of Indonesia. And within that app, all the PCR results, all the doctor results, you also all your vaccine results, right? It's an amazing undertaking. And for that, they work with all the tech companies, all the major ones work together with him. So the programmers
Yeah,
actually came from all of us, right?
it's incredible.
So which is super cool, super cool. He essentially said, you know what? I got to work with the private sector to make it faster.
Mm.
F it. Sorry, I'm recording, but F it. We're gonna work closer. We're gonna work fast, right? And he
Yeah.
did, right? It was super awesome, and that also helps on the logistical side. It actually helped boost logistic business while he was doing that, right? So that's a good example. What happened in the Ministry of Health? How do you roll out vaccine? How do you roll out medicine and food using logistical companies? And we saw it throughout our ecosystem. Yeah, super cool, man.
You know, we're starting to see this similar type of adoption of the advantages that working with the private sector can bring to public social goods, like let's say addressing COVID situations. We're starting to see that crop up across Metro Manila, in the
Awesome.
actually outside of the metro areas as well. But as we pointed out a number of times now, in terms of the trends and other factors, the Philippines is often seen as being anywhere between 3 to 5 years behind its neighbors like Indonesia. From your perspective, though, do you see the Philippines moving in the exact same direction as Indonesia? We do a
Yeah,
lot of benchmarking against other markets like Indonesia, but there are nuances between the two,
of
despite the
course.
similarities, right?
I think so. I think Philippine is going the right way. I mean, I speak with some of your business people as well, and they have very positive outlook of where things are going. And I know you're having an election this year, right? Soon.
Right.
And I heard who's there, the leaders, etc. Hopefully, it'll be the most positive outcome for Philippine.
Mhm.
I would say in Indonesia, we know the weaknesses we have. Our president is aware, the business people aware. I think the purpose, we have a strong purpose of how to make it better for the society we live in, and that's most important. And there is clear game plan of what we want to do. And for us in the business community, we also want to create a sustainable business for our stakeholders, right? So I'll give you an example. In Toba, which is our family business in energy, we were doing coal mining, coal power plant, just a great business from a cash flow perspective. Obviously this year, especially, but we've already committed that we want to become net zero carbon by 2030. So what are we doing? We're moving into what is it called, renewable energy. We got a 300 megawatt floating solar power plant in Batam that we're inshallah building soon. We have a hydro business. We're also building a wind power plant business. Just recently, we announced a JV with Gojek, which should be the largest undertaking of building two-wheeler electric vehicle ecosystem called Electrum. That's a 50-50 JV where we consolidate the company, and carbon credit. Now we're looking at carbon credit. Again, this is probably very risky for a lot of people, but I said we just got to do it. If it's not us who are privileged enough to be in a position where we are in, who else is going to do it, right? So I think we just got to do it, and I'm glad that now a couple of our other companies are also doing it, right? So I'm super excited that that's happening. And we're really we want to be focused. So even in terms of the people, because there's not as much talent, especially with respect to battery technology, we just got to bring global talent into Indonesia. And the good thing is the government is so supportive of it. As a good example, and not just local investors, Hyundai, which is a global EV, global auto manufacturer, just built an all EV four-wheeler plant out of Indonesia to be exported. And that's a good example. That's the first one globally that they're building is in Indonesia. And we're going to do the same as well for two-wheelers. So yeah, it's super cool, Santiago. This is the future. Honestly, it is risky. I'm being honest with you, right? I've told all of our shareholders, also all of our stakeholders, dude, we're probably going to be the one kind of bleeding a bit. We're probably going to get hurt a bit because it's so new. But hopefully we're strong enough so that we can build something really cool and really sustainable for Indonesia.
Yeah, you mentioned risk and the need to be bold in the face of risk. What are some of the unknowns about the Indonesian ecosystem right now? And maybe if you could comment on the Philippines as well.
So
What are some unknowns that might make or break this future?
yeah, so this is almost like we're building an early stage business. So this is similar to any early stage business. At the end, you bet on founders, you bet on characters, on the people who are the team that's doing it, and are they serious? If you look at track record, what are the businesses they've built and has it been successful? That's number two. And what can make or break? You know what I've seen when times are tough, that's when things you can see people, you can see those that have proven track record to go through this issue. They're the one who goes through it. The toughest part is actually analyzing younger entrepreneurs, right? Especially in startups. We've seen it now because of the downturn in the tech side the last 6-8 months. There's a lot of guys said, you know what, I'm done with this business. It's so difficult, right? But even throughout this COVID time too, we also saw some guys say, you know what, we're gonna go through it, etc. And honestly, those are signals that we can probably get when they first started their business or in their previous jobs. This is where venture capitalists kind of come in, because we're not just here to analyze technology or analyze this a potential market and how they're trying to solve it. We're here to also analyze founders, and this is an art. This is half art, half skill set, because you've seen enough, you've met enough people. You can kind of read people, you can kind of read background, and this is where probably you can separate venture capitalists, because half of our judgment is on the people that are building the business.
Yeah, half art, half science, and then a dash.
And you gotta believe in luck. You gotta believe luck. Right? It's not just a dash. Hopefully, we can create structural luck, right, in the business that we're in. So
right, exactly.
That's
Well, I mean, since you touched on it already, of course, every early stage investor, every venture capitalist develops their own sort of checklist or posture and philosophy when it comes to assessing opportunities. So some investors focus heavily on fundamentals and unit economics. Others, like you mentioned, they really invest in the entrepreneur. Right. You mentioned earlier Masayoshi-san. So that kind of mindset is what led SoftBank to make one of tech's most successful landmark investments in Alibaba. Well, specifically in Jack Ma, right? But it's also the same kind of mindset that got his firm tied up with a group like WeWork, right? So when it comes to early stage investing, specifically in Southeast Asia, maybe how would you describe your process for assessing startups and assessing opportunities for investment?
So if it's startup, it's a bit different, right? We look at, again, market potential or company potential. So we look at share assumption. How does it look like compared to India and China? Those are the two markets we like to look at. If you look at traction and metrics, we look at GMV, revenue, gross margin use, all of this we look at, and how do we transact it, right? But a lot of times in seed, we don't have it because it's simply an idea. And also then this is probably the most important in early stages, just team quality. So we kind of look at what's their background. Have they worked together in a team? Are they good team players, right? So I usually like to look at 2 or 3 founders, right? How they fill each other. And when they were in their previous job in school, did they do well? So this is important too. I mean, how can you analyze this? And then we also check with their bosses, with their employees, with the people they report to, the people they work together with, so the side reporting, and also the above, right? Above is easier because you but side, sometimes it's difficult because you're in competition with somebody beside you. You can be a really good person or nice, or you can be the other way around, right? So that's also important. And then when we invest, obviously we look at funding. We need to have a minimum stake for us, at least 10 to 15% is important. So when we help them, we can really help them, right? And obviously valuation, but valuation will come in later on, right? When there's already proven. So Series B and C, we have a dedicated team too, just doing growth stage and pre-IPO, where our focus then is on valuation. The team has been proven, different type of way of evaluating business. On the very early stage, honestly, founders and team is sacrosanct.
When you were developing and growing as an investor in startups over the past let's say 5 years, were there any peers of yours in the Indonesian investing community, or maybe in the regional or global ones that you looked up to or you learned from heavily?
I learned from all of them. I mean, they're all much smarter than us, I would say. So obviously our friends. The friends at Sequoia, they're super smart and they have a global view. Somebody like, I would say East, Roderick and Wilson are dear friends. So Man, I'm still new. I see it as new. I'm still learning a lot. And also my friends from business school. I went to Stanford for business school. A lot of them are much smarter than me, and they're doing obviously the VCPE business. So yeah, I learned from them. I'm still in touch with them. The only thing I'm good at, Santiago, is that I just keep good touch with high quality people. And honestly, I said I just want to learn from each one of you. That's it, right? And if I can share and can be useful to them, I'll be try to be as useful as I can. So that's probably the only thing. But if it's at school, etc., yeah, I'm still learning, even at school. I learn from all my classmates. I'm not that good in school even.
Speaking of learning opportunities,
Mm.
this is almost like a mantra in the startup ecosystem. Failure is a big learning opportunity. Were there any major failures that you look back
Yeah,
to
man.
as pivotal moments in your career so far?
Yeah, man. There's many. Thank God it hasn't killed me. That's why we can have this interview. But in
Right.
terms of investment, for example, I had a couple of donuts. One thing I learned is I can't invest in a single founder. It's tough, just one person. You know why? Because doing entrepreneurial work is a very lonely journey,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of effect on your mental health. And life is a long-term game, man. Santi, I think you're younger than me. You'll appreciate it when you're my age. That life is like a long game, right? You got to make sure your physical quality, your physical health, your mental health, all of that is always up to date and always strong, right? That's important. And if you're doing entrepreneurial work, it's so tough, man. Right when I was building Toba, thank God I had my aunt there helping me. I had a couple of others. If I had to do it on my own, shit, it will be very difficult. In investment too, I realized team is so important. The mistakes I've done was actually investing in a superstar founder, but not knowing who they can talk to. So when I built the team too, in terms of AC, Indies, Toba, it's really not just a superstar mentality. It has to be a team mentality. I guess your guys are big in basketball, right? Even in the Sakti, right? You guys are in Philippine are big.
Yeah,
You got to be more like the Spurs, right? Or
sure.
or like I guess the Golden State Warriors has a bunch of stars, but
Yeah,
even their main superstar is humble. You got to be humble. You got to be part of a team, right?
yeah.
A one single superstar won't work, right? And that's important. So I love team sports because team sports show that it's not just one person; it has to be an entire team, and that's similar in business too. We got to have a teamwork mindset in everything we do, and you got to be humble, right? There's obviously a very fine line between confidence and arrogance.
Hmm.
Confidence is important, but once you turn into arrogant and believe your own story, that's the start of your downfall. So you talk about, I've done it, I've crossed that path, and I realized, shit, I don't want to be that person. You go back, right? You got to be confident, and you always got to have a great degree of humility in whatever you do. Easier said than done, Santi. As you get older, you realize, shit, this is a fine line, and you gotta walk that fine line. But always choose the humility part. No need to be the showing off part, right? And that's so important in everything, every business we do. So sometimes, that's also a sign of character. Do you show off? What do you show off, right? I look at social media a lot of our founders from there because, hey, you know what? In social media, everything is about flexing. The question is, what are you flexing? What you own? Are you flexing your character? Are you flexing your output of work? Are you flexing something else? You're flexing something, right? So we follow that too, right? And that's something that's important because social media sometimes is a reflection of our own ego, right? So for me, my failure has been internally, if I look at it, is just investing in that, but also believing in my own view too much. So a lot of the failure in my investment is if I believe in my view way too strongly and I don't listen to others. So that's kind of the lessons learned. I always gotta learn and I always make sure my partners have a say in everything. If not, no point. I'm as good as the partners next to me, in my view.
I that wisdom, those insights, are really what you bring to the table in addition to capital, right? As an early stage investor, bringing that to a team. I suppose there's a whole process that goes into assessing and addressing what specific
Mm.
needs these potential investees have,
Mhm.
and how you can provide that. But this is just a bit of a follow-up question. We've seen
Mhm.
here in the Philippines a number of times now, startups joining a vibrant ecosystem of partners through let's say investors that come in and bring them into
Yeah.
their conglomerates, only to realize that their growth has become capped by that ecosystem. Is
Mm.
so my question is there a point wherein too much support can hinder an early stage startup success?
I think it's a fine balance. We want them to be entrepreneurial, but it's like raising a child. Santi, I'm also learning. I got a 6-year-old. She's 6 today. And it's a fine balance between babying her and trying to make her independent. I just realized from the teacher this morning, she said, hey, Talia, her name is Talia. Talia is very independent and very thoughtful and very caring with the other child. I'm like, she ain't like that with me at home. Shit, man. She's like
She
an
wakes you up at
alpha,
5 in the
not just.
morning.
Oh, she wakes me up, slap me at 5:30 in the morning. She was not thoughtful and neither caring, right? But this is a fine balance because we try to teach her one thing about value. So I repeat this. I repeat to Abel. I repeat to Amalia Danar. I said, hey, be humble, learn humility. I like that to play that Kendrick Lamar song. Be humble. It's a good song.
Yeah, sit down.
Sit down, right? I don't use the first word, be,
Yeah.
but sit down, right?
Yeah.
But to my daughter too, I said, hey, learn to be humble. You've been born right. Just simply half of the battle is just being born right in the right situation, right? So, be grateful of it. Be thoughtful. And when you have a high degree of humility, you always want to be useful. So I try to tell Abel and the guys always be useful to whoever it is, whether it's you yourself, your family, your workplace, the community that you serve, right? So that's one other value we have is we're here to serve, right? That's important in everything we do. And also to my daughter, always say, you also got to learn to be nice. It's tough to be nice, because it's a choice, right? Being nice is a choice. I'm not saying go out of your way nice, but if you have a choice, be nice to people, so I kind of regurgitate, right? I'm going back and forth on this, but yeah, you got to be humble, you got to be able to serve, be useful in that sense, and be nice. That's also important. So those are kind of values that are out there that serves a guidepost. In life it's a long game, right? But a game also needs to have a rule. So what are the rules? The rules are actually your values and your characters. So that's important. That serves you as a guidepost in everything you do. And if you break that rule that you set yourself, will you then have a guide, a purpose in whatever it is that you're doing, right?
Absolutely.
I sound like an old man, Santi. I'm still young. I do sound like an old man.
I guess fatherhood does that to you, doesn't it?
Yeah, man. You'll know.
What you mentioned earlier, you're currently working with Gojek to build that electric vehicle ecosystem for Indonesia. You're also working with Clean Power Indonesia to develop biomass energy plants. And I was looking at your investment portfolio. In the past, you've also supported sustainability and circular economy focused ventures like Surya, Waste for Change.
Yes.
So clearly, this is a long-term, powerful advocacy that you're championing with across the many hats that you wear. When it comes to supporting social impact ventures, how do you approach your decision to invest? Is it purely a mission focus, or I would imagine they need to tick off a number of boxes across business viability,
my box
societal
is
needs?
pretty simple. Yeah, my box are pretty simple. Is it a business that create a lot of value for society? If you do, you'll make money. I'm pretty sure of it, right?
But how do you define value then?
That people will use it, that this will create positive impact. I'll give you an example: Waste for Change or Aruna. Those two are probably the company. Aruna is very simple. They're in the fishery business. I says, what do you do, guys? And I know Farid from a long time ago. He was actually a hacker. He won the hackathon back in 2014 and the president. I was like, he was just a hacker, a smart guy. Then I found out his family is in fisheries. So he was saying, Pa, I want to build this business called Aruna. What is it? Pa, from the fishermen all the way to the restaurant or whatever the market is, do you know we have to go through 6 different brokers? Oh, really? Imagine if we cut all that middleman, it's just us as a platform. I'm like, that's a great business, because I know how these brokers work, right? They don't add any value, but they add costs, right? These fishermen essentially save 50%. And as you as a customer, you save 50, 60% of cost. The fisherman gets higher margin because the margin actually goes through all the fishermen. And obviously Aruna as the platform makes money right away. When we invest in that business, it was roughly a run rate 3 million revenue, or close to 3 million. Today it's close to 200 million revenue. Already break even, running essentially in some months, they can be EBITDA positive. It's a great business. And imagine they only touch about 90,000 fishermen. There's 3 million fishermen in Indonesia. So the business just started going. So these are things which I said, super positive impact. There was worry, oh, what about overfishing, etc. Yo, there's only 90,000 that they've touched. There's still 3 million other fishermen. And these are not big companies. When overfishing comes? When big companies start getting involved. And this is simply a platform helping small, medium, what's it called, a family of fishermen, right? So it's so cool what they're doing, and what Farid and the team has done. The other founders are also super awesome. And this is the best type of business we want to invest. Waste for Change will be another one, where they're doing B2B, B2C. How do you collect waste, and how are they doing it, and teach people how are they going about it. They're using technology to collect it and sort it, and then later on treat it, whether they treat it to be able to recycle or to be burned, right? And this is also a shift in consumer behavior, especially younger generation, 35 and below, where they care more about how they think about their waste, right? So we're catching up that trend. But a business has to make money, Santiago. It's not just being social, right? For me, everything is an enterprise. Social enterprise is another thing. We're underwriting the same way. We haven't changed on underwriting. It still has to be 30% plus IRR over the life of the time we invest in. If not, it doesn't make sense.
Again, just looking at your portfolio of investments, just as a follow-up, I see here peer-to-peer lending for MSMEs. There's a global startup generator that champions entrepreneur founders from day one. You're also modernizing warungs. I mean, in the Philippines, those would be sari-sari stores.
Sari-sari, that's right.
Yeah, in order to uplift micro-entrepreneurs with new technologies. So clearly there's a slant towards grassroots innovation.
Yeah, of course. Right? Of course. I mean, hey man, for me, it's like my life is short, and I think we've been privileged enough to be where we are. So if we can make positive change while doing it, why the hell not? It's much better. You feel better. You sleep better at night. And for us, it's super awesome, the stuff we've done. Actually, Abel can share you the amount of impact we've done across the portfolio. How much people have invested, the type of founders that we underwrite, right? And the amount of jobs created, right? So yeah, these are something probably I'm most proud of, right? Obviously, the return to our investors are equally important, and that's who we serve. But the amount of jobs that we create and the impact we've done is something that I'm most proud of. And at least for my daughter, is what I tell my daughter.
As a uniquely influential leader in Indonesia's tech ecosystem, you're doing many things to champion innovative tech companies domestically. So paving the way for more unicorns to go public, like you mentioned. You wear a dozen hats, and you're putting all of them to work to make these things happen. Given that it took you, I'm not trying to date you or anything, but about 20 years to get to this point, I'm curious.
You just did, bro.
My apologies, but I'm curious.
All good, bro.
What do you think the next 20 years, or maybe that's too much, maybe like 5 to 10 years is going to look like for you in your work?
I think the same. I think one thing I've told my partners, etc., I've been very privileged and fortunate to be where I am today. So if I have and I still have a lot of energy, in fact, I have more energy today, I want to just do fewer things, bigger impact, and bigger positive impact to the society I'm living in. So I've kind of refocused myself. For me to get here, it takes a lot of luck, right? Because our family is not a business family. So I started really as a business person trying. So I learned the fundamentals. I work in investment bank. I work for other people. I work in private equity. I try to take the best practice and try to teach how to be a good leader, learning what not to do, what to do from my bosses, right? And I think this is also important for any entrepreneur. Have a boss, learn what's good and what's not, because from there, when you become a boss, you try to be a leader that people want to emulate and people want to be with, because it's very important that people want to be with you. So, I actually just started my career, Santiago. 20 to 30 really is my just learning the fundamentals. 30 to 40 is trying to be better at what I've decided to do, which is investing. 40 now is the start of my career, is that I want to build really awesome things in just two sectors, energy and digital. In energy, TBS is my focus. And those through the efforts of the JV with Goto, the carbon business, renewable energy. In digital, AC Venture is one of my main focus in building a really awesome platform for us to invest in the leading technology companies, the leading entrepreneurs that are going to make a lot of positive changes. That's it. As simple as that, right? It sounds, you got to make it simple in your narrative, right? If it's not simple to you and not simple to Santi, not to Abel, then you won't know what you're doing. That's the compass. But in everything we do, you got to have a moral compass. You got to have a rule of game. And that rule of game is very important. That's your values, right? Because you ourselves, our team, our group, people want to be dealing with us, and it's all based on the character of our businesses, and that's probably sacrosanct to me, right? Moving forward. So next 5-10 years, fewer things, energy and digital, and that energy TBS focusing into becoming a net zero carbon through the activities that we have, which is number one, the JV with Goto in terms of EV, the renewable energy business, and the carbon side. In digital is how can we push the digital agenda forward in those three things, obviously e-commerce, the fintech, the logistics, and obviously new things within fintech like crypto, which is also a growing asset class. And how do we push forward digital companies to go public, right? And I'm using AC Venture, Indies. Those are just simply platforms, the businesses that we own to invest in these businesses.
Pandu, perhaps as a final question, I totally agree with you in the importance of a simple narrative that we need to kind of internalize. If you, going back to our audience, the early stage ecosystem of the Philippines, if you had the opportunity to write a simple narrative for the Philippine ecosystem, what would that look like?
For Philippine, you guys have been blessed so much, I would say, as a country. It's a young community. It's awesome, right? One of the things is that have a focus of what we want Philippine to be the next 20 years, 30 years. If you put yourself, Santi, you're a young man. Once you get into the age of 50, 60, what type of Philippine do you want to see? Number one, if you can translate that into become a prosperous nation, probably we all share similar view of what the next Philippine will be. How do you translate it pushing forward? That's something you should ask your generation, because this Philippine today, similar to Indonesia today, is not owned by somebody like myself or somebody on my age. It's actually owned by you guys. So you guys got to have a voice. You got to have a say. This is the Philippine I want to be. If you say I'm the future, you're not the future, bro. You're the present. My job today, right? And because I'm so closer to you rather than to what is it called? Our ministers, right?
Sure.
My job is simply to translate, right? I'm like a bridge between the 30 and below to the 50s and above, right? The 50s and above, in fact, it's not 50, it's like 58, 59 are those in power today. But don't forget, you're only in power temporarily. Your job is to translate the voice of the young people, because you know what? The Indonesian, the Philippine today is held actually by the young generation. So you guys have to voice up. You guys have to say, this is the Philippine I want, right? And the job of those in the government is simply to translate that. Yes, there's always human nature, bro. It's given, because sometimes it's power, right? Power can go many different ways. But if you have a sense of purpose, a common view of where things are going to go, then you're golden, man. So that's most important.
Well, Pandu, this has been an amazing conversation. I really, really appreciate all the generous insights you shared. And I hope we can do this again another time.
Of course, absolutely. Thank you, Santi. And if you need any material, Abel is here. She has a lot of this type of work, and also Amalia. So she can also help you. Yeah.
That would be fantastic.
If you need anything.
And speaking of the future, happy birthday again to the boss, Talia. We'll make this, we'll build this ecosystem, this regional ecosystem right, so that she can thrive in the future.
Of course. Awesome, bro.